the differences and similarities between the entertainment video game industry and the real money gaming industry. Just for ease of use, we'll use games versus gamings probably. Gaming being the real money games and games being traditional video games. But before we do get started, I want to introduce Alex here. He's part of TrustStamp, and he's going to talk a little bit about what TrustStamp is, since they're so kind to sponsor this session for us. So.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, guys. I guess I'll just talk without the microphone. Thanks, everyone, for having us. Thanks for letting us sponsor. We're happy to be here. Really excited to be part of the industry. We're just getting our feet wet and learning a lot. Obviously, real money gaming has been kind of one of the driving forces, especially after the tax credit. So we definitely see a great significance there. But so TrustStamp, we are a spatial biometric software development company. We are artificial intelligence powered, and we focus on a proprietary technology which we call proof of life. So proof of life is the ability to scan your face and prove that you're a real live living person at that moment in time. The driving force behind TrustStamp was really the increase in crimes that were due to internet-related activity, or increase in internet-related crimes due to synthetic identities. So to combat these crimes, what we did is we took our core technology and broke it into a series of microservices. And these microservices can be used to build out a customized solution to fit the very specific business and industry needs of our customers. So our customers range from Fortune 500 banks to real estate brokerages to small businesses and consumers. Virtually anywhere there's a need to verify the identity of an individual or stranger via the internet. So the reason that we're really here is we were introduced to the gaming industry by a group of 15,000 mobile gamers. And these mobile gamers were online trading account codes with each other. And a lot of them were experiencing fraud, or they were suffering from fraud due to synthetic identity. So the administrators of this group reached out to us looking for a tool that they could use to verify the identity of their members and their members to each other, and ultimately hold each other accountable. So a funny thing we've actually found out was that the majority of the illicit activity that was going on in this group were by minors. So these minors were using fake profiles to basically defraud other people. So we needed a tool that we can use where minors can communicate their trustworthiness while at the same time remaining anonymous. Obviously, that's important for keeping kids safe online and also keeping us compliant with COPA. So out of this, our first product was created Trusted Avatar, and Trusted Avatar allows minors and adults to become verified by linking their accounts to verified adults, while at the same time remaining anonymous using a Trusted Avatar to interact with people online. So, yeah, I mean, this is one example in the industry, but we see that there's a huge potential need for fast and reliable identity authentication, especially where real money's involved. So, we'd love to talk to developers and continue the conversation with gamers just to learn more about the specific needs. So feel free to reach out to me or any of our TrustStamp reps this weekend.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, you.
All right, so now that Mr. Bivens is here,
Yes.
we can get this party started. How about that? All right, so since you're the last one in, you're going to be the first one out to introduce yourself and what you do.
Okay. Yes, my name is Chris Bivens. I'm a artist at our company, AGS. I've been there 10 years now, officially, this past June. So my day-to-day is usually comprised of, concepting, storyboarding, whether it be a feature or, particular animation. Whenever, we say we go from our base gameplay to our bonus gameplay, or, anything pertaining to that. And, I also animate as well. So, when I first started there, I used to do pretty much everything, even design stuff. But as we've kind of grown as a company, I'm more specialized in illustration and sometimes a dabble in animation. So.
Nice.
Cool. My name's Simon Rakestraw. I'm a senior software engineer at AGS. I've been there for 9 years, and before that, I worked on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 games, which were new consoles 9 years ago. So I've I worked in both fields. I've worked in, you know, the traditional video game field and the real money gaming field, and I can say that the real money gaming field has treated me a lot better.
I'm Jeremy Tuck. I'm an executive producer at AGS. I've been at the company for about 6 years or so. Before I was there, I was a producer in the video game industry as well. So I actually have Simon beat. I was working on the Xbox, the original one. So I got him by about 5 or 6 years there. But generally on a day-to-day, my job is to herd the cat herders. So we've got a bunch of producers who work with our teams and make sure that we make the products, and part of my job, a vast majority of my job, is really making sure that there's nothing that gets in their way. We also run an embedded QA group and work on a lot of our road mapping strategy for the new products.
Awesome. And I'm Ron Williams II. I am a lead producer at AGS as well. So when Jeremy's herding the cat herders, I happen to be one of those cat herders that he's herding. Yeah, and I also do a lot of stuff on the side. I do my own indie games and a lot of other things. So I've got a nice exposure on the breadth of the things that the game development industry has to offer. And so we'll be talking a little bit about the similarities and differences of those things. So my first question for you guys is, generally people don't want to get into this industry. They find themselves in this industry, right? It's not like somebody woke up one day and said, hey, you know what I want to do? Let's make a slot machine. Right? I don't think anybody's ever said that in life, and if they did, then they are a special person. But so how did you find yourself in this industry?
Mine was totally by accident. It was actually one of the video game developers that I had. He was a designer at the video game company I worked at. He actually had left and had moved on a couple of different jobs. I was working in the healthcare industry, but kind of looking for something new. It was a little bit slow, a little bit backwards for me. Coming from digital, it's really slow and plodding. You know, it's very conservative industry. It's not very fast-paced or anything like that. And I was looking for something new, and he called me up and said, hey, you want to get back into gaming? I didn't want to get back into video gaming. I had the company I had been at Crunch for the last year and a half of a product that we were working on, so we were working between 80 and 110 hours for about 16 months. It was awful. So he told me, it's not the video game industry, it's casino games. Check it out. I actually go home at 5 p.m. every night. I have a 9 to 5. I work 40 hours a week. We're stable. We make 40 or 50 products a year. So we don't have the last 2 or 3 years of our lives hanging on one product. So there was a lot more stability to it. And, I actually had the work-life balance that you're promised in the video game industry, but unless you're at a really, really special company, most of them haven't quite figured it out. So for me, it ended up being a pretty easy decision, and so I said sure. Went down to Atlanta. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I've been in the slot industry for the last 6 years. And other than a couple of weeks, I do actually, a couple of weeks in those 5 years, I do actually work somewhere between a 40 and 45-hour week. It's reasonable most of the time.
How about you, Simon? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, so I went to Full Sail. A lot of people go to Full Sail for games, and I was working at a game studio in Phoenix, and I was working for there a few years, and then after a couple of games, I was like, I don't really like Phoenix at all, and I grew up in Atlanta, and I wanted to move back to Atlanta, so I started looking for jobs here, and a friend I went to Full Sail with already was working here, and I got referred to the company, and that's how I turned into it, and it's similar skill set. At the time, it wasn't so much I wanted to work in slot machines, as more as it was like, I can do this job. It's the same thing. It's the same skill set. And it turned out to be a good choice.
Awesome. That's going to lead into my next question, but we'll let Bivens answer first.
So with me, coming out of school, I just needed a job. And, of course, I went for animation, and I wanted to work at Disney or Pixar, but I came out of Art Institute of Atlanta, so I was like, that would be nice. I don't really have the money to move out there. You know, I just need something to just hold me over until then. So, but I knew two guys that I went to school with that worked at, well, at the time it was called Cadillac Jack before we got bought out. But, you know, I saw the stuff that they were doing, and, you know, I was like, oh man, that looks really cool. I never thought that, you know, doing like a 3D model of like a cartoon car thing, character, you know, it just seemed interesting to me. So I was like, well, shoot, you know, if they can bring me on, I would love to join the company. So started there, and yeah, just, you know, I've been there ever since, and you know, I've enjoyed every minute of it. And you know, one of my friends ended up becoming my boss, which was interesting, but you know, but you know, it was a smooth transition. But yeah, you know, I've enjoyed people I work with, and you know, I've kind of dabbled in like film and television, kind of just doing like storyboard and design work here and there. Outside of that, no other like gaming experience outside of this company. But you know, yeah, I've enjoyed it. I've heard all the horror stories, but yeah,
It's the industry you do.
Yeah.
Awesome. So one of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning is we're going to be interactive with you guys. If you ever have any questions, feel free to raise your hands, and we'll love to field those questions too. But as I was saying, Simon, you kind of made a perfect segue into my next question. So
Yeah.
I actually found myself in the industry because I went out to San Fran for GDC.
Mm-hmm.
I was a student. I was trying to break into the video game industry. I was just talking around to a couple of companies, and one company in particular that I used to work for was like, hey, a lot of what you do sounds pretty good and pretty similar to what we're doing. Why don't you come and try this out? I know you didn't think about slots, but how about this? And did it, loved it, been in the industry ever since. It's been going on 4 years now. So my question to you, all that is a long-winded way of saying, we had similar skills that we were building up in the video game industry. What skills do you think in your respective roles were most transferable from your background experiences or other experiences? So Bivens, for your film experience and stuff like that, how does that translate over to the gaming industry?
Well, a lot of what we learned in school, you know, because the whole curriculum was based on, you know, like captivating your audience from, you know, a film standpoint. And so I felt like, you know, I've always been like big on like storytelling and, you know, and you know, trying to, you know, through my images, like, you know, convey a feeling or, you know, convey some kind of emotion. So when I got into this industry, I realized that a lot of that really did apply to, you know, my position and, you know, kind of where that company was trying to go at that point. And with bringing me on board, you know, they wanted to bring on kind of fresh new talent, and of course on the cheap, you know, because they were, you know, with new graduates and stuff, you know, bringing them in. You know, I felt like a lot of that stuff that I had learned in school was, you know, like, okay, how do I convey, you know, a certain kind of anticipation or emotion in front of the player when they're playing these games, and whether through the characters or through the animations, you know, how are we designed, and you know, even color theory, you know, how does that convey to the player, and what kind of emotion do we want to, you know, have them, you know, express or feel. So I felt like that helped a lot.
How about you, Simon?
Yeah. Yeah, I think programming in a visual medium is the same. Probably similar to web design too, where you're programming something that a user interacts with. So the way it looks is very important. The way it feels is very important, as opposed to writing some back-end bank software where as long as it gets the job done, it doesn't matter what it looks like or how it runs. But, you know, programming is really just like a Swiss Army knife. You can apply it to a lot of jobs. There's a lot of people I went to school with for video game programming that are doing very boring stuff right now. I like to say that video games is the gateway drug to programming, and that there's a lot of people that wouldn't be in programming if it weren't for video games. But it's a great field. But this is like really, I think, sort of the best of both worlds, in that I do get to work on a product that has you know, final visual outcome that I can show people and say, look at that, I made that. you can't do that with like, hey, you know that Chase login screen that you went to? I made that. You know, like it's not as cool.
Even better, I built the database backend for that.
Right, right. So it's definitely satisfying to have that final product. But as far as the skills overlapping, yeah, like I said, programming is if you're a good programmer, you can program anything. But there's the pride that comes with making something tangible.
Awesome. How about you, Jeremy?
You know, I wish I could say that it's a lot different from any other project management, but project management is project management in a lot of different ways. Like Simon said, it's a tool that needs to be applied. It has some slight differences. When I was in healthcare, I was in project management there, and even in healthcare, it's a similar type of thing. It's organizing people, it's trying to get a product out to the best quality in the shortest time frame without killing any of your staff. It requires a lot of the same skills regardless of what industry you're in. In some ways, the nice part about project management in the casino industry / gaming industry is there are a lot of different projects that you're on at once, so there's a lot of things to keep track of, but the individual products tend to be a little more simple, than the video game development, where, a single video game, you will have, 100,000 plus assets in a single thing that your team has to create. You've got the level design, you have everything. And whereas, the slots, we, just by nature of what they are, make much more simple product. So it's still very fast-paced. It's still dealing with a lot of the same problems, but you aren't on the same thing all the time. So it's always kind of refreshing. It's always something new. There are some companies, and we will be getting there eventually, that kind of work on a project for a year or two, but that's not what we do at our company right now. We work on a single project for 3 to 5 months, and we're working on the next thing. So it's a lot of translating skills.
But just like with any other field, right, there's the variability on the complexity of the project that lends to the duration of it. So
yeah, but so it's a lot of the similar skills to kind of bring it back and not go off into the weeds like I sometimes do.
Well, no, you're leading right into the next follow-up question, I think, that logically makes sense, which is, what skills were the new ones that you had to acquire? And so you're talking about the differences between the two games and being able to focus on, instead of one thing that's like got so many layers of depth to it, to multiple things that have a little bit less layers of depth to it. How big of a difference is that for you as a project manager?
So it's different in that you have to track a lot of different projects in different states. The video game industry in general, if you're working on a AAA type of title, you're going to work on one project. You have to be juggling where the individual levels are and things like that within the project, so they tend to be smaller pieces that can break down. But this is really following a lot of different things in very different states of complete. So in some ways there's more to juggle, but it's very much more making a product. It's hard to say. It's design in video games is much more intangible than it is in slot machines. So it's a little easier to know what product you're working towards, and so the complexity is a little more manageable, I guess, would be the best way to say it, than the video game industry. So I don't know, that doesn't really answer your question, but I don't have a great answer for that question, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know what you mean by like indefinite. Like in the video game industry, you can be working on a video game, and then halfway through the project, it's turned into something completely different than what you set out to make. That's definitely not the case with us. So a lot is set in stone before artists and programmers ever start working on it. What was the question? New things I had to learn.
So I'm going to tweak it a little bit for you guys. So
okay.
Yeah, like what skills did you have to develop? What skills did not translate from your experiences?
The biggest thing, and this is not a skill, but the biggest thing is just coming to terms with all the terminology and regulation in the casino industry. The casino industry is super regulated, and there are a lot of rules we have to follow, and there are a lot of things that we have to do just because someone in Las Vegas said we have to do. But I mean, once you learn those, it's pretty easy. As far as like, because of that, I guess you just have to be a little more conscious of the code you write. Like, I can't write goofy comments because literally some regulator is going to read all the code. And, you know, if I put in there like, oh, this is a hack, they're going to be like, this is a hack? Wait, well, we're going to, you know.
True story, this has happened
Right,
in our
so-
games before. This is a hack removed for production.
Yeah, and they'll catch you on that. You just have to be careful, you know. There are a lot of requirements for slot machines programming-wise that normal video games don't have to do. The biggest one is reliability. So these machines will be on for weeks, months in the casino and smoky environments with no heat, and they have to not crash, which is a tall tale. Like, try leaving your Xbox on for a month. It's going to crash, no doubt. So they have to, not crash, no memory leaks. They have to recover from a power hit. If the power goes out in the casino, it comes back up. Person's money has to be there, right? Or else you're going to have 500 angry people in the casino.
I wish that was the case.
So don't tell me this. I think it's true. Are they running Windows?
Some are. We aren't. We're running Linux because Linux is free and you don't have to have a distribution license for it. Yeah.
The platform and operating system and things like that is up to the discretion of the company that builds it, but
Linux or Windows tends to be two of the
That's
main operating systems
I don't
that
know
are
of a
used.
single slot machine that's running OS 10 or whatever.
Programming these in typically which languages? Just out of curiosity.
the question was, what languages are you programming these things in?
Yeah, so we have a couple of engines we run right now. One is programmed, the core is in C++, and then we have a graphics layer that's all Lua scripting, and our other engine is Unity. So that's C# and Unity. So.
So, Bivens, what skills?
what was
did what skills did you have to acquire in order to really become successful in this industry?
Yeah, it was kind of like two different things. Like, it was like on the art end for me, it was, I guess, a lot of painting. I didn't, coming from an animation program, we didn't do a lot of painting. It was a lot of drawing and like color and stuff a little bit here and there. But I really had to learn like how to like render images and like shiny gold and shines.
Lots of gold.
Yeah, lots of gold.
Everything's gold.
Jewelry and even just like different environments, whether it be like realistic or more photorealistic side or kind of realistic or really cartoony and we kind of the industry kind of goes in different phases of like what's popular, what's hot, especially with like art packages. So like there was a time where we had to do like realistic, photorealistic looking like women, in exotic, landscapes or whatever. And that was a challenge for the whole team, just trying to like find that balance of, photorealistic, like, but do they really mean this, or do they mean, this, like, romance novel, or do they mean, like, movie poster? So I've had those kind of art challenges.
But it sounds like
starting here.
It sounds like the bottom line of what you're saying is just the versatility.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But I'm kind of ADD anyway, so I can't really focus on too many things at once for a long period of time. So it's kind of helped me like being able to kind of hop around on different things, and I like going into each project not knowing what I'm going to do, if I'm going to animate this time or if I'm going to just illustrate symbols this time or whatever. But like as far as on the I guess the other side of it was kind of like the interactivity of player input and like having that kind of reaction time. That was a big, I don't want to say big challenge, but it was something I wasn't used to, coming from a film and television background in school, and like having a lot of those skills, like it didn't really like, wasn't like a one-to-one translation of like this to here. So it took a couple years to just like trying to figure out like, okay, what is a slot machine and like how does all this stuff work, but then also like once I started building that that skill set. Like, okay, well, how do we like get to the players, like whenever like they have a big win, like how do we celebrate that? Like what's the most interesting way of conveying that from our standpoint? And then working with programmers, and they're not. We all play video games and stuff, but we're coming kind of from two different disciplines. So kind of like trying to get on the same page if we're trying to communicate an idea of what is it. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So you handle the animation too?
Oh, I'm sorry. Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were pointing to him. I was like, oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You handle the animation.
Yeah.
Do you
I
handle
do
the
animation
So
as well.
Is that like recorded like in Blender or Model?
Well,
or do
can you repeat the question?
program that in? How do you do the animations?
So the question is, how do you do the animations? Is it done in Blender? How are
Or
you?
Is
it done in code?
recorded,
Is
or
it?
video clips or?
Yeah.
How do you-
Yeah, well, I mean, we have like this like standard like Adobe suite, what do you call it?
After
Photoshop,
Effects.
After Effects, and we have Maya, and some people used to use 3ds Max, but we kind of just once we kind of just take all these different things, and sometimes I use Flash and Toon Boom for like some of the 2D effects, I don't know how everybody's familiar with Dragon's Lair, but we had licensed that game, and there's some things I had to like recreate within the Toon Boom software, which is just like a traditional animation program. So a lot of that stuff I did in there just to like trying to like match the frames and stuff, but we pull everything into After Effects, and that's like the final compositing and putting all the assets together and lighting all that stuff, particles, and but we export just as either PNG sequences or mainly just like an AVI, and we just use Bink, and we would just bink those animations and hand it to the programmers, and they input it from there. So
But that's one way.
that's one way of doing it.
right?
I mean,
Especially
some
moving
of the
towards
3D
Unity.
people,
Yeah.
they touch Unity a little bit more than they kind of delve into that. We've only kind of just like recently trying to like
Animate stuff in
do
the
that,
Unity
yeah,
engine.
within engine, kind of
So
trying to
you use
animate.
3D models
Mhm.
and render them as on a 2D screen?
Occasionally, most
Yeah,
games we do are
occasionally.
2D, but we do some 3D stuff too.
Mhm.
So that leads into, I think, one of the next questions that I wanted to ask you guys is like, outside looking in, when they said to me for that first phone call, "Hey,
Mhm.
come work on slots," I'm like, why?
Yeah.
What's the difference in
Yeah.
a slot machine from the first one to the 100th one that you've worked on? Like, they all look the same to me. I've never played them. I don't
Mhm.
care, right? What actually is different, and is it a creativity process that goes into this? And if so, what does that look like for you in your roles?
As I get what you're saying. Like a lot of people hear slot machines or casino things, and they picture, like the thing with the arm and the cherries, and then that's it, right? But it's like they're incredibly complex. If you have been to a casino lately, they have like movie licenses. They've got videos. The 3D ones now, like. They'll transition you. A camera will fly up to this bonus screen. There's a little like leprechaun dancing around. Like there's a lot of moving parts, and they're way beyond what you see in movies, basically, which is
Yeah.
the 3 cherry machine that spits out coins. They don't even spit out coins anymore, guys.
Question
I have
here.
a question for
Yeah.
Simon. Have you ever done any kind of programming for gaming or the money-wise gaming on mobile devices?
So the question is, have you done any mobile game
Mhm.
development?
I haven't personally at our studio, but we do have another studio as a part of the company that makes mobile games, and that's something that I've been to panels for and research, and mobile slot games are huge right now, and they're not even for real money, which is crazy, like just for credits. And it's the same reason people slay slot machines, is because when you win something, you get like that endorphin rush. Just winning something is exciting. That's why loot boxes are so popular in video games now, because people just love to win stuff.
Yep.
So we're like the OGs in that.
I want to ask you that same question too, Bivens, but before I do, I actually am curious to hear Jeremy's thoughts on it. Like, from a project management standpoint, it's got to be, and I'm kind of asking a leading question since I know the answer to this since I do it too, but it's got to be nice having a more defined and explicit set of things that you're going to do, as opposed to a video game. Like every game that you go into, it's 100% nailed down what you're about to do, right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, and I think what you're alluding to is in the video game industry, there's the term you're finding the fun, right, for design. That's, at the end of the day, a video game, it's supposed to be fun to a wide breadth of players based on player input. So there is, that's what you're doing. So what you're talking about is it's a little bit less firm at the beginning of what you're actually going to create. You're going to tell this story, but you don't know how you're going to tell it. Yes, what we make in slot machines is very much more simple in that we know we need 13 pictures for symbols. We know all these things need animations, and we know there's a normal part of the game, and then there's a bonus where the game plays a little bit differently, and then there's this other thing where this. So we know what those are, but in some ways, you're not finding the fun, but you're telling a story in the slot machines, especially with video slots, which is what we do. It's just the story isn't a story as you normally think about it for Hollywood or video games. You're not telling the narrative of, any video game character. I'm drawing a total blank right now. You're telling the narrative of the math of the game design. You are trying to tell a player through sorts of cues, visual, audio cues, what's important, what they're rooting for, why they are excited when this type of thing happens. So, it is very much simple in that we are creating a widget every time. We know what product we're creating, but we're still trying to figure out the best way to tell the story of it. So it still has a lot of interest, and so every game is different because every game has a different story. We may choose, this game, it's going to take your money and then it's going to give you a ton of money, but we got to keep you around until it gives you that ton of money. We have a different game where this game's just going to kind of give you small winnings all the time. They're very, very different person, and we build the games very differently depending on what we're trying to create, because we're telling a different story with every different game that we're making. It's just a story that's not necessarily obvious from the outside.
I like to look at it as like a good analogy for me is a puzzle, right? If you look at a puzzle, at the end of the day, a puzzle is going to have a pretty similar shape on the outside, right? But the visual layer of that can be drastically different from puzzle to puzzle. And even the individual pieces are different, right? Is it a puzzle that's 500 pieces or is it 5,000 pieces, right? There's so many different layers that you can do within this underarching rule set that you have at the end of the day. So it still provides opportunity and room for interesting design and creativity decisions from both a designer's perspective and from a contributor perspective as well. So hope I didn't steal your answer, but but so for you, like working on a slot machine is all just cherries and sevens and watermelons, right? Like,
it's funny because I did caricatures at like a kid's birthday party like a couple weekends ago, and one of the kids, they were probably like 11 or 12 years old, and they were just asking like stuff about art, like, oh, what about this, or what's things I can work on. So I was just telling them, just draw more, blah 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 blah, going through that whole spiel, and then I think he asked me, well, like, what I do full time or something. I was like, oh, work at a slot machine gaming company, and like that little piece of crap was like, oh, well, that's like cherries and watermelons. Like, what? But
I was a little piece of crap. Is that what you called me?
You at the party line?
I saw the camera and I was like, well, let me clean it up.
You come in late and then you call me a little piece of crap. We're gonna have a conversation on Monday, man.
And like, it's just funny that like even little kids now, like that's like what their idea is. Oh yeah, it's like the stereotype is still, like cherries and fruits and sevens. But it was just, I thought it was funny that he said that. I love him though. But but yeah,
This is nephew.
I mean, I had the same idea, like, about slot machines going into this industry. Like, I had never stepped foot into a casino, like, when I got the interview, and even when I got the job, I had never been into a casino. But my grandmother goes all the time, so she's always telling me stories about whenever she goes. And she calls them arcades, by the way, which as a kid, when she would say that, I'm like, I want to go to the arcade.
You can't go to grandma's arcade.
Yeah, I didn't know what she was talking about till like way later on. But yeah, I had no idea how vast and how diverse the industry is, and just how complex a lot of the different art packages and styles and animations and
We've done games with Peter
sounds.
Pan.
Yeah, we did a Peter Pan game. It was
And
really
grizzly
fun.
bears with thunder in their eyes.
Yeah, it's like
Lots of pretty ladies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've been able to work on a lot of different, even a lot of weird and quirky stuff, and that if I were working at, I don't know, like Naughty Dog now, they wouldn't even touch, even with them doing Crash Bandicoot. Thunder Bear, Firewolf, and all these different kind of weird titles. And then we do a lot of Asian themed games as well, which aren't as fun to work on, but it keeps my paycheck rolling in. So
Well, I think that it's really interesting because you were talking earlier about the fact that you don't know what's coming next, right?
Mhm.
What the next project is, and you come in. We've worked on projects together, right? Where
Mhm.
we've come in blind at the same time, and
Mhm.
one game might be that Asian style game that's
Mhm.
so hot in the industry right now. So we do a lot of, obviously.
Mhm.
But then you might come up on the very next project and it'd be something wild like, I don't know, Cartoon Devils.
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
something like that,
Mhm.
right? We can say that since G2E was this week.
Okay. I was like, oh man, he's still with me.
It's also in our ad in the book, so.
Yeah, you can actually
That's
check it
why
out
it's in
out
the
there.
ad.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
right,
Is that
right.
G2E?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting because you never know what you're working on next.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one project can look one way and the next one is just like a completely different
Yeah.
left field kind of
Mhm.
thing,
Mhm.
right? So how do you prepare for handling whatever is thrown at you? Where does that creativity come from?
I don't know how to prepare for it. I mean, I guess I just, I guess just getting a general idea, okay, are we sure we want to go this route, right? You guys sure? And, I like that process of kind of doing research and kind of just just looking up different art styles, or, if I need to figure out where's, I don't know, something from a movie or, whatever, or some kind of image that kind of conveys what, we might be trying to, what direction we might be trying to go to, or at least what I want to go to, and then I'll hey, I think we should do this, and I'll try to present it, a certain way, when I, make my visual statement, and I'll, kind of put a couple concepts together, and, just images and whatever that kind of gets me excited, oh yeah, it would be cool if we could do this, this would be a really fun thing to do. And sometimes, we might have to dial it back, or sometimes, oh no, crank it up, let's do more of that. So yeah, I don't really have I guess it is my preparation for it. Just spending a couple of days, just okay, what do I want to do with this? Where do I think, with my experience, where does this need to go?
Yeah. I think that when you walk into a casino, right, once you get past that whole preconceived notion of the stereotype that we were talking about of all slots look the same, and you actually walk into a modern day casino, any floor in Vegas or anything like that, obviously there's a huge visual variance that can happen in games, right? But what isn't so obvious at first look would be those different ways that the game plays that you were talking about earlier. The ones that are, going to spit out a lot of money at you at one time, but it happens few and far between, versus the one that's kind of here and there every once in a while. So from a technical perspective, it's interesting to hear what the creativity and the process looks like, and that how can, design be different for something that seems like it's so similar?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some new feature. So the basic guts of a slot machine are always the same. Like, you put money in, there's a math algorithm, you get money out. And we actually, over the years, have created like a template project, which makes it like really easy to get that out of the way to get to the cool stuff. Which also makes it really great for new hires, because then they just don't have to like freak out, because like all the easy stuff's taken care of. But then as a programmer, like the most fun thing to do as a programmer is problem solving, like figuring out like a cool way to fix something in code. So like recently we had a game that had like a crystal ball, and so they wanted like a fisheye lens effect on the crystal ball, and so this guy got to like research and figure out how to do like this fisheye effect like just in this one section of the screen. In the past I worked on a wheel, like a spinning wheel, and that was especially exciting because a lot of companies have spinning wheels, but it's usually like you press a button and the wheel just spins on its own, or you can touch it, but it doesn't matter how you touch it, it's just going to spin on its own. And so coming from like, my video game background, I'm like, I'm going to make this like a physics-based wheel, It's like you drag it like a touch screen, and you spin it and it spins, like the exact speed you spin it, but it still stops where we want it to stop. And we actually got a patent on that procedure, which is super cool. So like, yeah, it's like I didn't worry so much about like the spinning the reels or the symbols, or because that was all taken care of. Like, I just got to focus on like the cool stuff.
Awesome. That's a really awesome point that you just brought up. And Jeremy, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the patents in the industry and how that works. You think that for something that seems from the outside looking in so similar that there's no way that you can get a patent on something, right? So how does that work in this industry?
Patents in this industry, there are a ton of them. And really, the nice part about this, as with most industries, the patents really come, they come from the staff, they come from the people making the games. As Simon was saying, when he was coding this very specific wheel behavior, it was the first time that it had ever been done in our industry, and with all the physics and everything like that. So it was something that, people were like, okay, this is new, this is unique, this is something neat. We should write up a patent on it. We will make it so we can get a patent, we'll write it up, we'll file for it. We have, a good incentive program associated with the patents, so everybody who writes a patent for us maintains partial ownership of it. I mean, or at least their name gets on it. The company technically owns it, but their name gets on the patent. We have, incentive programs and things like that. But it's really, they come from everywhere. We have patents on ways we do things in software. We have patents on all the hardware that we create. We copyright our artwork. So there are a lot of ways to get patents. They come from everybody, and it is as simple as, sometimes it's as simple as looking at what somebody has done and finding a way to do it better. Sometimes it's something completely new that nobody has ever done before, and so you're really breaking new ground. It really depends on what is the need for it.
So it sounds like even from a technical perspective, right? Even though there are so many games that might have a wheel or something like that, there are just infinite ways to be able to solve the problem.
There's always new ways to do something, yeah.
It's still creatively challenging from a technical perspective, just as well as a visual or creative perspective, right?
Yeah, and hardware too. That's something else that is very unique to this industry. Is if you're working on the iPhone or something, right? Like, everyone's got the same iPhone, and the slot machines, it's really like an arms race to see who can like be the flashiest and get people to come over to the machine. So like our standard slot machine has 3 screens, 2 1920 by 1080 screens, and then a screen on as for like a button panel, like a touch screen that you can press. Some have like giant vertical monitors. Sometimes they have ones that have like multiple layers to them. There's also like all these flashing LED lights you get to control. Like, there have been times in my career that I've had like 7 monitors on my desk, and I know that's like a point of pride among programmers of like how many monitors you can have on your desk.
He's down to 4 now.
Yeah, I'm down to 4 now.
I don't know
but,
what that's
like,
saying
big
about what's
vertical ones. But yeah, you get to work on some like really cool, like weird cutting edge stuff, which you would not expect. I was just talking to you. We're not doing this, but this one company has a 3D monitor that you don't need glasses for. It like follows it does eye tracking, and it's like 3D and like on a slot machine. Like it's crazy. It's cool. It's crazy and it's cool.
It's cool.
Would you say it's crazy cool?
Yeah.
And I would even argue, like you guys were talking about, because you go so quickly on your projects, like we're talking about the Asian influence art being really hot right now, it sounds like you guys get to keep a little bit more with what's happening in general. I don't know how to say it. Like, you're working on a game for a year and a half, you don't really get the chance to go, oh, this is really hot right now, let's put that in your game. Whereas it sounds like you guys get a lot more.
It's kind of trend-based, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think Bivens kind of started talking about the different trends that happen in the industry and his experience with our company, right? You were talking about over the 10 years you were here, what did things start off by looking like? What was that like hot theme that happened, and then when it transitioned? I think you also talked about the photorealistic time frame, and then how it moved to like the Asian-inspired time frame. Like, can you talk a little bit about those trends and how you kind of vary, but still?
I think so when I first started, what attracted me to the company, was because my background was like cartoons. That was like what I wanted to do. So then they did pretty much all cartoony stuff, and I was like, oh man, that's really cool, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of dabble in different things here and there and all that. But then I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 years in, it kind of, I saw the trend kind of shifting a little bit more realistic, and it kind of just slowly started gravitating more towards like photorealistic. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. But then I think it was because mainly as an artist, it was because it was like challenging myself, and I was like, I'm just not used to producing art, at this level of quality, and but I had to, and I'm like, well, I gotta accept the challenge, especially if I want to keep my job, and it was a cool challenge, and I've learned a lot, just because I do stuff on the side for myself, and a lot of the techniques and tools and stuff that I never used, say like in Photoshop, I've been able to kind of like translate that to my own work. So it was a good challenge for me, in doing that, and so it kind of did like that realistic kind of style, and then I started going towards like I guess like pretty girl kind of flowy hair, top screen,
the romance novels.
Like romance novel stuff. And then within over the last couple years, it's it's been more like that Asian, Chinese themed sort of style of game. So, but within that, even though we've done so many, even up to this point, we're like 20, 30 titles that we've done. It's always interesting, like seeing like what new things that we've been able to do, with that, just. This game could just be like pandas and, more like Zen, serene and all that. And then we have another game where it's just like, like two, flowing dragons flying on the screen and blowing water and all that, so it's like two completely different games, but they still cater to that Asian theme audience, which is, I really like applaud our team for, constantly like trying to step it up on each new project. Like, well, how can we reiterate this into something new and different, but still kind of gives you that Asian thing feeling that those, that our customers are looking for.
Right.
And I don't even know what it is now. I got to hear back on Monday and see what they saw at G2E. Like, oh, this is what we're doing now. Yeah, so yeah, it'd be interesting, see what the next trend phase is.
From a visual.
How do you determine the current trends?
How do you determine the current trends?
Do you go wander around other casinos and see what they have?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of market research, and it's seeing what games are performing for other companies.
Do they let you know that? Because that seems like proprietary information.
There are industry reports, sorry.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to repeat the question. So
Right.
the initial question was, how do you know what is the market trend? And then piggybacking off of that, how are you getting that information? Because it seems like it's proprietary information that you wouldn't have access to know how well something's doing.
It's a lot of anecdotal information. There are reports that do show the best performers in the industry per markets and things like that are publicly available. It's a report called the Eilers and Fantini. There are other industry reports. We talk with our operators. We talk with our customers are the casino operators. We talk with them a lot about what's working well for them, what's not working well for them, because at the end of the day, they want us to create the best product for them. So they're interested. They won't share exact numbers, but we'll hear a lot from a lot of different customers and a lot of different sources. And then we actually have all the metrics on our own things. So we can also extrapolate trends from things like that, where we can look at, this in the background might be the same game as far as the math is the same, but this one has an Asian art package, this one has a Greek goddess art package. Which one does better, and things like that. So there are a lot of different sources that we use to figure out what's trending, and the gaming industry is very small. We have a lot of friends at a lot of places. If you've been in it for a few years, you'll know people at a lot of other companies, so we all talk with each other.
Wow.
And we try to, we follow trends, we also try to set trends. So what he was saying, that we do the same math. A very common thing is we'll have the same same math. Essentially, it's the exact same game, but have different art on it. And that way we can experiment a little bit and say, like, okay, we know that this math performs well. Let's put this weird art package on it and see if it still performs well, so that way we can experiment a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting is there are so many different levels on what makes a game successful, whether it's a video game or a casino game or anything like that, right? The first thing that when you walk into a casino is going to attract you to any machine is how it looks. What's the art package looking like, right? But if somebody sits down and they're not having fun, why are they not having fun? It's probably because the math isn't so fun to them. It's not the type of experience that they're looking for. If that's not the case, then maybe there's something about the game and how it works or how it looks, or not how it looks, but how it interacts, that's not so great for them, right? So there's so many different levels. Maybe it's a sound, right? You've got all these things in video games, and then just add one more layer in there with the math experience of it. That's pretty much the big separator on what makes a video game successful versus games in the casino industry. Had a question?
Can you talk a little bit about how you actually get your clients? Like, do they come to you looking for more games? Do you create the games and then pitch them to them?
Great question. How do you get your clients? Do you pitch games to them and then make them if they like it? Do they come to you? How does that work?
So the casino game industry is a bit different than video games in that we have established relationships with casinos. As new casinos open up, we have salespeople in those regions that make new relationships with them. We are in the position where we are a full-service operator and provider. We do everything from designing our hardware to designing our games to customizing our operating system, building our own platforms that we work on, we do all the field tech support and everything like that. So we are a fully integrated supplier, vertically integrated. So for us, we have very established clientele. There are, however, and this might be closer to what you're thinking, there are, however, several independent developers out there that may not have a fully vertically integrated package. Maybe they have designers and artists and audio people and programmers, but they do not have the capital to be able to build their own hardware, to have a sales team in force, to be able to do all the certification. So they are a little bit different than us in that they do have to approach full suppliers. So we actually have third-party vendors that we work with. It's as simple as, for those people, it is reaching out to the bigger providers and finding your way in. The gaming shows are big ones. There's a Southern Gaming Show over in Biloxi, Missouri, that's in like April-ish. We just recently came back from the largest conference of the year for our industry out in Las Vegas. That was this week.
It's called G2E Global Gaming Expo, which is the equivalent of E3 for the casino gaming industry.
Yeah, so the independent providers, they approach a larger provider, and those are a matter of, depending on what you provide, you are either saying, hey, I have this package, are you interested in it? Or, hey, we have artists who are looking for work, do you guys need extra art bandwidth? So it really depends on how you're approaching it and what sort of organization in the industry you work in. For us, we don't have to go find somebody all the time. We form a new relationship with a new casino when they open, and then we essentially say, hey, here's our library. What do you like out of it? What do you want? This is the stuff that's performing in other casinos in your jurisdiction. This is some new stuff, that kind of thing. So we're in the ability where we pretty much decide what we make.
Yeah.
Do they ever pitch it specifically if a casino say was out in the Cayman Islands or something like that? Would they pitch you an idea of saying making a slot machine that's specific to the island theme or something like that? Do you have
Has a casino ever pitched a specific theme that they wanted to go with and asked us to make it for them?
Sure. Fact of the matter is, though, it's rare. In general, there is enough in their library. We do have some clients that are very important to us who, if they need specialized product, we will take care of them.
Sometimes we'll customize something for a casino. So if it's, Lucky Seven's game and this casino is called Jake's, then we'll make Jake's Lucky Seven, for you guys.
Yeah.
So our industry, like we said, we work on so many different types of products and various products there that I don't think it's that much of a need or for that to happen. I don't think it happens frequently because we have such a wide array of things that we do. I think that if every game was really just following what the market trend was and nobody was actually trying to set the next trend, then that would be a scenario that we were in. But because we said at one point we were making 50 games a year, right? So 50 games a year, even if 25 of them are all Asian inspired, there's 25 or 25, 30 different games that are out there that are completely different and can be that cartoon devil or the dragons or whatever it may be. We're about to run out of time here, but I did want to talk about one more thing I think that is a huge difference between games and gaming. It's kind of the boring stuff, I guess. So I'd like to hear, starting on this end, because I think that, Jeremy, you can talk a lot to the design, and then Simon, you can talk about the implementation, and Bivens, you can talk about the visual aspect of it. How do regulations play a role in what's happening?
Oh my. That's such a big question. It could be. So we've alluded to this a couple of times. I just straight up mentioned it a couple of times. We work in a highly regulated industry. At the end of the day, there are rules that we have to observe if we want to sell our product. It's not like a video game provider where you have to pass Microsoft's Gold certification or you have to pass Sony's Lab. We have to pass legal obligations. Our games cannot be sold if, as Simon was saying, if it loses power, the game does not come up to the same state that it was at. So we have to be aware. There are things we cannot design in our games. We cannot design things that are blatantly misleading or lying to the player about the outcomes. We have to design observing all of these regulations. So really, we start with a basic design. Hey, we think it would be really cool to have expanding wilds, where if a wild lands anywhere on the reels, then all of a sudden it grows. So instead of it being worth 1 wild, now all of a sudden it's worth 3 or 6 or 9. So we say, okay, cool, we want to do this. How do we make it work within the regulation? What do we think would be a fun thing for a player to do that doesn't violate any of the rules? And so they play a very major role in all of our decisions after we say, hey, this is the kind of game we want to make. Did you have a question?
Yes, I was curious, so there's so many regulatory bodies and there's so many different jurisdictions, and the funny thing about laws is that they're constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, from a production standpoint, keep up with that and adjust as they change?
The question is a very good one.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a talk in and of itself.
That's true.
But the question is...
That is a talk at a lot of other conferences in and of itself.
The question is, how do you keep up with all the different regulations, different governing bodies, and the changes that happen to laws on a constant basis?
We pay departments of people and lawyers. So that's the real short version. The longer version is, fortunately, where we are, we're kind of a mid-level provider. We are not at the absolute top. We're not one of the huge companies. So we're actually, at this point in time, really in kind of North America. So the United States, Canada, and Mexico. We don't work a whole lot in Asia or Australia or things like that. So that certainly simplifies it in that we are under kind of a smaller number of bodies. But that said, there are also some certification labs that are partners with all the jurisdictions, that they maintain a rule set. So we make sure it sets, the lab is called Gaming Labs International, it's GLI, and they have a set of rules that they update every so often. And if you pass their lab certification, you tend to be approved in most of these industries.
Yeah.
And then you've got some outliers like Nevada. Nevada is GLI plus a little bit. They have their own regulatory body. But most of the jurisdictions, at least in North America, if you go through GLI and pass there, you're going to be okay to pass. Canada's a little bit different. Mexico's a little bit easier. It really kind of varies, but yeah, it's complicated. Is really the short version.
To add on to that, I came from, by some metrics, the largest gaming company in the industry before I joined with these guys, and every single game that we did, that was a concern, because this game was going to go to Las Vegas, this game was going to go to Macau, this game was going to go to Australia, and all of those places have very different regulations, like you were saying. Underlying what those bodies stand for is fairness to the player. So even if you have different ways that they might put a tweak on a rule, the bottom line is it just needs to be fair for the player, right? So there might be special ways that you get there. There might be some kind of statistics that you have to point out in some place that you wouldn't in other places. So the way that we would tend to build games for that type of environment was, if you build to your tightest constraint, it generally works for everything else. It's not, in most cases, there are some exceptions, but in most cases it's not exclusively, if we're working in this area, then we're not working in this area, right? It's more so how tight are the regulations on a particular aspect of a game. So
There's not a lot of conflict. There's very few cases where they're like, one jurisdiction says you have to do this, and then another jurisdiction says you can't do this. Like, luckily that doesn't happen very often.
And pre-cert labs. We have a whole department that their job is testing to the regulations. So they, we have embedded QA that tests, very similar to embedded QA at a video game developer, make sure the art's good, it doesn't have any bugs in it, that kind of stuff. But, that we have a pre-certification lab that essentially they have the current version of all the rules and they test to the rule book. to make sure that nothing's out of compliance.
Hate to cut this question off short, but I want to end on a high note instead of the regulation.
Oh, come on, that's the fun stuff.
So, what is your favorite thing about this industry as opposed to the other ones that you guys have experiences in?
Bivens, you want to start with this?
My favorite thing, I guess, just I don't know, creating art, and I can look at it and see like, yes, I did exactly that, and I could, my experience with working on films, I've done storyboards and design, and it's not what you see on the screen. It's, I created that idea that led to this. When I tell my grandmother and I'm trying to explain what that is. But she can go to her arcade and she can see like, this is my grandson, he did this game, and and she sees like everything that I slaved over and trying to get right, in all that, and animations and design and all that stuff. Like she sees it right there when she's looking at it, and so yeah, I'd probably say that's the most satisfying thing for me.
It's not like, hey, I did this texture on this character.
Right, yeah.
It's, I did this whole art package,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely the final product is something cool to, to look at. I, worked in the game industry for like 4 years. I worked on 4 different projects. 2 of them were released. I had a lot of throwaway work. But an average year here, I'll work on 4 games, So I've worked on dozens since then, so.
Yep, and I'm going to go with something similar to that. It's the variability of experience. We work on a ton of different products. Mobile games, it's not quite as much, but with AAA titles, you're working on the same thing for 2 or 3 years. Depending on how the project's going, you love it or hate it at various points in the development cycle.
And depending on the mobile games, because you have games as a service versus the shorter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too, so.
Versus us, when you're never on a game long enough to start hating it. We're on to the next thing.
Yeah.
We always have something new going on. As we said, I think the longest game that we've worked on as a company was probably Peter and Wendy. Yeah. Was that year and a half, 2 years?
We had a bunch of people on it.
Yeah, it was a year and a half, 2 years,
and
that was way long. And everything else is shorter.
The producers are cool because you guys recognize those.
Only industry year and give that statement. The producers are cool.
Because you recognize when a game is not fun, and you're like, oh man, that game was really not fun. Here's this crazy, cool new thing that's completely different that you get to work on now.
Awesome. I'd like to piggyback off of what they're saying, but I'm not going to at this point, just because you've heard the speed and variability of what we work on. I guess my second favorite thing then personally is just the quality of life in this industry. Jeremy was talking about it a little bit earlier. Throughout my entire career, coming from the biggest game company in the industry to working where I'm at now, it's been a very, very comfortable work-life balance. And I really appreciate that for every place that I've worked. And even when I was at the largest company, we would have our moments where things could get hectic, but it was never huge, extended 18-month periods of time. I think that we are a very close-knit, tight community. And one of the things that helps sell this industry to prospective employees is the fact that we can maintain that type of work-life balance while still working on entertaining, fun games. So, thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate you hearing out everything we had to say, and have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.